All right, everyone, settle down, settle down. So today we are going to tackle a real giant, tuberculosis. We're going to break down the entire modern strategy for treating it. And let me tell you, this is absolutely crucial stuff, not just for passing your exams, but for your entire life as a doctor.
Before we jump into the drugs and the details, I want you to just look at this number. Just for a second. 71,000.
That's how many new cases of multi-drug resistant TB we see in our country. Every single year. Now, these aren't the simple cases. These are the tough ones. The patients where our best, most powerful drugs have already failed. This is exactly why you cannot afford to get this topic wrong. Okay, let's dive in.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start by understanding the bug itself. Then we'll look at our first line of attack. What happens when the TB fights back? Then we'll see who we call in, the specialists. And finally, we'll cover the actual battle plan, the rules of engagement.
First up, Section 1, you've got to know your enemy. And believe me, Mycobacterium tuberculosis isn't some simple, single-minded foe. Oh no, it's a very shifty, very adaptable opponent. And this right here is the main challenge. The TB bacillus is like a spy with 4 different disguises inside the body. First, you've got the ones growing like crazy in the lung cavities, where there's lots of oxygen. They're the easy targets. But then, you have the slow-growing ones, hiding inside our own immune cells, the macrophages. Then there are the spurters that just pop up now and then in these low oxygen zones. And the toughest of all? The dormant ones, just sleeping, waiting. You see? You can't use just one weapon for all these different targets. It won't work. This is the absolute fundamental reason we must use multi-drug therapy.
So, since we know we need a combination of weapons, let's move to Section 2 and look at our main army, the first line of defense.
These 5 drugs are your best friends. You have to know them by heart. HRZES, isoniazid, rifampin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, and streptomycin. Now, of these 5, 2 are the absolute superstars, our most powerful killers, and that's H and R, isoniazid and rifampin. So what are we actually trying to do here? It's not just about making the patient feel better or stop coughing. The real goal is twofold. 1, complete sterilization. We have to kill every single bacillus, whether it's dividing or just hanging out. And 2, we have to do it in a way that stops the bug from learning our tricks and becoming resistant. Both parts are equally important.
Which, of course, brings us to Section 3. What happens when the treatment isn't quite right or when this clever bug just outsmarts us? This is the huge challenge of drug resistance.
Okay, now I need everyone's full attention. This definition is vital. What is MDR-TB? It means the bacteria is resistant to our 2 best drugs, isoniazid and rifampin. Not just one, but both. The moment H and R are useless, butcho, the whole game changes. This becomes a very, very grave situation. And if you thought MDR was bad, it can get even worse. Meet XDR-TB. This is MDR-TB that has also become resistant to our backup forces, any fluoroquinolone and at least one of the injectable drugs. At this point, your treatment options become dangerously limited, way more toxic, and much less likely to work.
So, what do we do when our frontline soldiers fail? Well, we go to Section 4. We call in the specialists, the second-line anti-TB drugs.
These are our reserve forces, drugs like the fluoroquinolones or injectables like kanamycin. We keep them in reserve for a good reason. Generally, they are less effective and much more toxic than our first-line drugs. The treatment is longer, the side effects are harsher, but for resistant TB, they are absolutely essential.
So we have the individual drugs. Now for the most important part, the battle plan. Let's look at Section 5, the rules of engagement. This is all about the strategy of how we combine these drugs to win.
The core of any modern regimen is a 2-phase attack. You start with an intensive phase, or IP. The idea is to hit the bacteria hard and fast with multiple drugs to bring their numbers down really quickly. This is followed by a longer continuation phase, or CP, where we use fewer drugs to just mop up any survivors and make sure they're all gone for good. Now let's see how this works in the real world with the RNTCP guidelines. For a new patient, you see a 2-month intensive phase with 4 drugs, HRZE, followed by a 4-month continuation phase with 3, total 6 months. But look at a patient who's been treated before. The whole thing is longer and more aggressive, right? That's because we're already a bit suspicious that the bug might have seen these drugs before.
And this, bachcho, is the golden rule. If you remember absolutely nothing else from today's class, you remember this.
Never treat tuberculosis with a single drug, ever. If you do that, you are not treating the patient. You are actively breeding resistance. It's a recipe for disaster. Combination therapy is the absolute non-negotiable law.
Now, compare the simple 6-month plan we saw earlier to this one, the regimen for MDR-TB. It's a completely different world. The intensive phase alone is 6 to 9 months, using 6 drugs, including injectables. And the continuation phase goes on for another 18 months. The patient has to go through this incredibly tough regimen for up to 2 years. Now you see why preventing MDR-TB in the first place is so incredibly important.
So we'll end on this thought. This is a dynamic battlefield. For every new drug we develop, the mycobacterium is evolving ways to beat it. It's a microscopic arms race. And as future doctors, the huge responsibility of using these drugs wisely, of preventing more resistance, is going to fall squarely on your shoulders. The only question is, are you ready for that fight?
All right, everyone. Good morning, good morning. So today we're jumping into part 2 of our chapter on leprosy. Now, for thousands of years, this disease was, well, it was terrifying. A diagnosis was basically a social death sentence. But today, right now in our clinics, we can look a patient in the eye and say with 100% confidence, this is completely curable. So how on earth did that happen? How did we take one of history's most feared diseases and turn it into something we can beat? Let's find out. I mean, just look at that. This really says it all, doesn't it? It's a complete paradigm shift. What was once this slow, isolating, unstoppable illness has been totally transformed, all thanks to pharmacology. The journey from, old things like chomagra oil all the way to modern combination therapy, it's a fantastic story of medical science and just plain persistence. So, first, the basics. Who's the villain in our story? Well, it's a bacterium called Mycobacterium leprae, and it's a very, very slow-growing bug. Its main targets are the cooler parts of our body, so the skin, the inside of your nose, and most importantly, the peripheral nerves. And it's this attack on the nerves that causes that loss of sensation and the deformities that have always been so feared. Now, the first real hero to enter the fight was a drug called dapsone. You have to understand, before the 1940s, we really had very little to offer these patients. And then, this one simple molecule comes along and just changes everything. And here it is, diaminodiphenylsulfone, or DDS, what we all call dapsone. For decades, this was the sheet anchor, the absolute foundation of leprosy treatment. It's a simple molecule, it's cheap to make, and it was the first truly effective weapon we had. People tried to make other similar drugs, other sulfones, but honestly, none of them could ever really beat the original. So how does it actually work? Well, think of it like this. The bacteria needs a nutrient called PABA to make folic acid, and folic acid is essential for it to grow and multiply. Dapsone is a clever little molecule that gets in there and blocks the bacteria from using PABA. So by stopping folic acid production, dapsone basically starves the bacteria. It doesn't kill them outright. Its action is what we call leprostatic, but it stops them from growing, which gives our own immune system a chance to take over and clear the infection. For a long, long time, dapsone was our only real option. We used it all by itself, what we call monotherapy. But, as we all know from microbiology, whenever you fight a bug with just one weapon for too long, that bug eventually learns how to fight back. And that is exactly what started to happen. By the 1960s, a very, very worrying trend started to pop up: dapsone resistance. The bacteria were evolving. The miracle drug that had saved so many was becoming less and less effective. And for us doctors, this was a massive crisis. Now, it's important to know this resistance comes in 2 flavors. First, there's primary resistance. This is when a patient gets infected with a strain that is already resistant to dapsone from the start. The drug never even had a chance. But the bigger problem was secondary resistance. This is when the bacteria become resistant inside the patient's body while they're being treated with dapsone alone. And this became a huge issue, affecting up to 20% of patients on monotherapy. So one soldier was no longer enough. The solution? Well, it was simple, but absolutely brilliant. You send in an entire army. And that's the logic behind multi-drug therapy, or MDT. Instead of one drug attacking from one angle, you hit the bacteria with multiple drugs from all sides, all at the same time. Our new arsenal is a team of specialists. Dapsone is still on the team. Think of it as the experienced veteran, but now it has some seriously powerful backup. We brought in drugs from different families, some from TB treatment, some others, all working together. So let's meet the key players, shall we? All right, first up in the reinforcements is rifampin. This one is the superstar. It is the most powerful bactericidal drug we have against this bug, killing over 99.99% of the bacteria in just a few days. Then we have clofazimine. This is a very interesting one. It's actually a dye, and it has a 2-for-1 benefit. It stops the bacteria from growing, and it also has anti-inflammatory properties, which is super helpful for managing some of the reactions that happen during treatment. So why was MDT such a revolution? Well, because it solved pretty much every problem at once. It worked on dapsone-resistant bacteria. By using a combination, it stopped new resistance from even developing. It made infectious patients non-contagious within just a few days, which is huge for stopping the spread. And listen to this. It cut treatment time from years, sometimes for a whole lifetime, down to just 6 or 12 months. And the relapse rate? It dropped to less than 1%. I mean, come on, that's a total game changer. Okay, so now we have this army of drugs. How do we actually use it? We have a very clear playbook laid out by the World Health Organization and, here in India, our own National Leprosy Eradication Program, the NLEP. And the first, most important step is to classify the patient's disease correctly. So for treatment, we divide leprosy into 2 big groups. The first is Pauci bacilleri, or PBL. Pauci means few. These patients have 5 or fewer skin lesions and are generally not infectious. The second is multibacillary, or MBL. Multi means many. These patients have 6 or more lesions, a much higher bacterial load, and they are the ones who can spread the infection. This simple classification decides everything about the treatment plan. Okay, everyone, pay attention. This right here is the heart of modern leprosy treatment, the WHO and NLEP regimens. For Pauci bacilleri, the PBL cases, it's a 2-drug plan, rifampin and dapsone for 6 months. Simple. For multibacillary, the MBL cases, we add clofazimine to the mix, and we go for 12 months. Now, a key detail is that the most powerful drugs, the big guns, are given once a month under our supervision to make sure the patient takes them. The daily dapsone, they can take at home. It's a very smart and effective system. So we've made incredible progress, right? But the battle isn't quite over. There's one last tricky enemy, persisters. These are dormant bacilli, basically hiding out in the body's tissues. Because they aren't actively dividing, our drugs just fly right past them. They can lie low for years, and then, long after treatment is done, they can wake up and cause a relapse. Sneaky, huh? And that brings us to our final question for today. We have an effective cure. We can make people non-infectious in days. So to really, truly get rid of this ancient disease for good, what's the final hurdle for your generation of doctors? Is it a drug problem, finding something to kill those stubborn persister bacilli? Or is it a public health problem, fighting the centuries of stigma that still stop people from coming forward for treatment early? That's the question I want to leave you all with. Think about it. Thank you.